Hi, we're here today with Hamilton County historian David Heighway, and we're going to be asking him some of the most unique questions that he's been asked throughout his profession as a historian. You ready?
Uh-huh.
Let's get started. So, were there ever dinosaurs in Hamilton County?
There probably were, but of course the thing is we're not able to find any evidence of them right now. But when the glaciers came through thousands of years later and scraped off that layer of soil that they were a part of, actually scraping it down to much earlier levels of bedrock, of limestone bedrock. Now the thing is we have found plenty of fossil evidence here, and that's an interesting thing for a historian to track because it tends to be things like the giant ground sloth skeleton that they found over near where the modern judicial center is today. But usually the things we find, I say, are more Ice Age related, such as mammoths and mastodons and things like that.
Was Strawtown on the list to be the first capital of the state?
That's an interesting myth, and we have spent a lot of our time dealing with it, and it's actually kind of handy because officially, of course, they have said no, that it was not. But the thing was is that Strawtown was a very important community. It was a crossroads of really this part of Indiana, with the road going north-south and the Lafayette Trace going east-west. It was a very, very significant community, and actually the real reason they didn't consider it is not because it was too small, but because it was actually kind of a rowdy community. That was a jumping off point for pioneers, and they had a distillery, and they had a horse racing track, and a variety of things like that. So it was probably a little bit too exciting for the planners and commissioners, and instead they decided on William McCormick's place down in Indianapolis.
Where in Hamilton County did the Underground Railroad run?
It's interesting. People expect to see a general path or something like that. What they don't realize is that the Underground Railroad really was just sort of a collection of like-minded people. So as a result, basically we can say the entire western part of Hamilton County was the path of the Underground Railroad, going up through Carmel, or Bethlehem as it was known then, particularly Westfield, and then on up through towns like Deming and Sheridan and points north. So as a result, it's a little hard to put directly on a map, but it would be a collection of just the communities in there. People ask occasionally which houses would be found on the Underground Railroad or which ones were a part of it, and I say any house that was built prior to 1860 would definitely be considered probably part of the Underground Railroad.
So did the horse Dan Patch ever race here?
That's really interesting in the sense that, of course, Dan Patch was a famous Indiana trotting horse, sulky horse. And when people got interested in him, they wondered if he'd worked around the various county fairs. And he did, mostly where he was. But within a year of people having discovered he was such an excellent horse, he started becoming a national figure. And so he never actually physically raced in Hamilton County. But the interesting thing is that Hamilton County has a particular kind of soil. This soil was found really around the area of Sheridan, and it was loaded into gondola cars, put on the Monon Railroad, and headed up to the Hawthorne Racetrack up in Chicago, and down to the Indiana State Fairgrounds track down in Indianapolis. And the thing was, is while Dan Patch did not race in Hamilton County, he did race at those two racetracks, and therefore he did race on Hamilton County soil. So we're taking that as a win on that one.
So I've heard that this next one is a tricky one. Was John Dillinger ever held in the jail here?
Yes, that's another myth that seems to have popped up through the years. And the thing is, John Dillinger did come through Hamilton County. He came down 31 when he was traveling from, say, Chicago to Indianapolis and the family homestead and things like that. But, and he was actually even in an auto wreck up around the Sheridan area. But as far as staying in the Hamilton County Jail, this jail was kind of a joke. It had 15 escapes in the first 3 years. So John Dillinger would not have taken this jail very seriously. He would have probably just walked right out of here. So while we're fairly certain that he did come through the area, he was not actually held at the jail at any one point in time.
Did James Dean ever play basketball here?
You know, that question was brought up when people were interested in Hamilton County connections to Hollywood. And of course they thought, well, James Dean played for the Fairmount basketball team. Did that ever come down to Noblesville and play here? And no, they didn't. We have searched the old yearbooks from the time he was in there, and we never played Fairmount. We had our own collection of celebrities. We had, for instance, Earl Lucky Teeter, who was a famous stunt car driver back in the 1930s. And we had Norman Norell, famous fashion designer in the 1960s. Both of those fellows, Teeter did stunt work for movies, and Norman Norell did costume work for movies such as Touch of Mink with Cary Grant and Doris Day. So while we did have some connections to Hollywood, James Dean was not one of them.
Well, that's all the questions we have. Thank you so much, Hamilton County historian David Heighway. If I have any future questions, is it okay if I ask you, or?
Of course.
All right. And that concludes our Q&A. Thanks for watching.